Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of our weekly series on men. Last week, we addressed issues of stereotypes, of success. These are conversations meant to spark other conversations within our communities. It is not a reaction to a problem, but rather a response to a reality. How do men handle issues that daily confront them? We believe so much in some labels society has dressed us up in. In fact, what does it mean to be a man? That is, as in a male. Men don't cry, men are powerful, and you name it. In my estimation, there is an urgent need for self-discovery. Each one of us, men, has to sit down and we need to have a conversation with ourselves. I have often been amazed by the question Christ asked, "Who do people say I am?" And after his disciples, his apostles had answered, he turned around and asked, "But who do you say I am?" And for me, I think the second part of this question, both questions are equally important. And so when we sit down on this journey of self-discovery, we'll be asking, who do people say we are? Who do people say Lambert is? Who do people say BK is? And after we have gone through all that, we must and should ask the second question, but who am I? Who am I? How often have I looked at the mirror and asked myself, who am I? And like onions, when we peel off the layers, we are often left with tears in our eyes. Last week, we talked about showing up. We often show up in life carrying a lot of baggages. We carry lots of baggages, known and unknown. And in my estimation, the crisis in manhood is essentially an identity crisis. We don't know who we are. We want to be somebody else. And very often, because we do not know who we are, we do not check these baggages at the door, we bring this into our relationships. And these then multiply depending on who we meet, or else they just work out perfectly. What am I bringing to this relationship? How do I show up? There is a lot to unpack as we embark on this journey. We invite you to join us. If you are a man, join us. You are a woman, join us. Husband, brother, whatever, join us. I invite each one to join us. If you are on my Facebook page, I would invite you to go over to my YouTube channel, just type my name, like it, subscribe, share. Also, check out Mindset Boulevard on Facebook. Mindset Boulevard. Check it out. Let's continue having these conversations. We have taken a commitment every Monday for the next 52, 53 weeks. We will be here to have a conversation, to have a discussion. We don't just want to be part of the problem, if there is one, but in fact, to acknowledge a problem and seek the solutions. And so, as always, to help us continue the discussions from last week, to help us continue the conversations from last week, to help us navigate these waters, I have my brother and friend, BK. BK, How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Lambert, and it's great to be here once more. I did quite enjoy last week's show. I love the fact that it was organic and we took it in all different directions. Let's see if we can streamline today and take things even further. Thank you.
So let's get started. And I just want us to piggyback from last week because the one takeaway, the major takeaway for me last week was men are ignorant, women are naive. Surprisingly, that's a major takeaway for me. But I just in order to unpack that, because we started off by saying just show up. In my intro, I mentioned that again, just showing up. And if we don't understand it within a certain context, it may create problems. So in order to again continue the conversations, just take us back. What is it last week's conversation meant for you?
Yes, so last week we talked about showing up and the question, we when we look at the whole concept of showing up, it brings us back to identity, Lambert. Who are we in essence? Are we the name badge? Are we the name tag? Are we our titles? See, these are are we our training? I mean, we are bits and pieces of all these, of our experiences. We are the sum total of the experiences that we have had. But more important than that, we are just energy and we are potential. I like to use the example of the car. You see, your body, your form is no different from the car that you drive. Now, when you drive from say point A to point B, which is your destination, you leave your car behind, and then you go to where you need to go and you take care of business. Notice that the body is no different from that car. So when you come to a particular place, the body is the vehicle that brings you to this place, and then you are meant to engage and interact. And what is the object of that interaction? The object of that interaction is to exchange energies and build synergy. So you want to come to a place where you are building, where you're empowering, where you're inspiring, where you are a light, and you are driving things to a particular outcome where everyone feels empowered, everyone feels motivated to be the best that they can be with the resources that they have. Now, if you show up as a particular identity, if you show up as a father, then you are limited to being a father. You're limited in your capacity. You're limited in what you can do as a father. If you show up as a medical doctor, for instance, then again, the question then becomes, is that relevant to the conversation? Is your title, is your position, or that limitation that you bring, see, because these are the positive experiences that we bring, which can sometimes still limit us. But then if you show up as, if you were to show up, say, you're carrying all this luggage and you feel you are not good enough, and you show up as this undefined entity, what does that do to you? What does that do to your ability to add to a conversation or to learn from that conversation? Notice that when you are limited, when you limit yourself to a particular thing, that defines you, and that definition entraps you. It ties you down to a particular cluster. It locks you in a particular compartment, and you can't really come out of that compartment. You can only operate within its limits. And imagine what that does to the conversation. It takes away everything that you otherwise would have brought to that conversation if you just showed up as energy. That's the term I always love to use. If you just showed up as potential, knowing that you were coming in there ready to learn and ready to contribute. Think about it. Think about those days when you show up, you go to work, for instance, and it just feels like you are so on top of your game. Nothing is above you. It doesn't matter what gets thrown at you. You find yourself operating at a level, you find yourself delivering at a level that you did not realize you were capable of. You're on your feet, you're on the ball. You know answers to questions before they are asked. You anticipate questions sometimes even before they are asked. And you begin to ask, you begin to wonder, but then what happened on that particular day? It's almost like you were in communication with a force that was much bigger and much wider than who you are, than the limited essence of self that we normally bring to the table. Then on the other side, conversely, there are days when you show up to a conversation, or you show up and you realize you you are just blank. It's like you have nothing to say. You have this cloud in your head and you struggle with your own name. So what's the difference between these two experiences? The difference is the way you showed up as. How free were you? What luggage were you carrying? How inspired were you? What are the thought processes? What was the communication, the conversation in your head? How did you define yourself before coming into that situation, before coming into that environment? And so we realize that the way we show up to a particular place will by and large determine how well we perform. And it's not about performance, it's about building synergies, it's about an exchange. So you're not a teacher, you're not a student, you are the teacher and the student at the same time. So that pretty much covers the concept of showing up. I don't know if you would like to interject, if you would like to come in, or if you want me to just continue some of the other concepts that you talked about.
No, so again, it was important that we understand what we meant by showing up, because I mean, we generally have to show up in everything, isn't it? When in this particular context, we're talking about relationships. You have to show
Yeah.
up, but how we show up is important, and that's why I talked about the baggage. Is it we come in life with all these baggages, and you used a very important concept last week too about how you open up. You're giving a candy, you have to unwrap it, isn't it? And then you throw that away. But the way you show up, very important. But take us again in the process of showing up.
Yes.
You said something about men being what is the term? Men being ignorant and women being naive, and that seems to be countercultural or counterintuitive. How does this help us push the conversation further? So I show up with this baggage. All of us are already ignorant about the baggage. I am ignorant. The woman is ignorant. There's something I show up with. How we deal with that is a different part of the equation. So I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yes. So when we say men are ignorant and women are naive, again, I want to articulate the positive intent behind this statement. It is not meant to denigrate. So when I talk about ignorance, it is an ignorant of wanting to satisfy a loved one and not knowing how to go about it because we feel entrapped by and large. What do I mean by that now? If I do not know what it is that makes you happy, if I do not know how to meet your needs, if I confuse your needs with your wants, and if I don't have any direction that I'm going in, that you can follow and I can be a clear leader one where we can co-lead, then I will be trying things left, right, and center. I will have no bearings and I will be driven by my fears. So because if you come now, if I come into a situation that I do not understand, because for men generally, a man wants to know that he is in control. A man wants to know that he understands the terrain. He wants to know that he has got a map of the territory. And if he pushes a certain button, he will have a certain response. And that is what gives most men a feel of a sense of identity, a sense of respect, a sense of value and valor. Now, if this is missing, if this is lacking, then we start second guessing ourselves. We don't want to fail. And in our desperation not to fail, what do? We start trying to control. And that is what fear would typically bring to this environment fear and insecurity, that aversion to being vulnerable, that trepidation. So we panic when we think that we may not get it right. And that is what I mean by the ignorance of not understanding what it is that we're dealing with, not being able to anticipate what the outcome of a particular action would be. It leaves us in a place where we are not confident enough to engage. And so, what suffers first? Communication. So, once communication takes a hit, misunderstandings obviously take their rise from there. And it is the beginning of that recipe for disaster. And that is how that starts. Now, that
So,
is men. Yeah, so that was that for men. Go
mhm.
ahead.
No, I mean, if you want to go, so because I wanted to also just stay a little bit with vulnerability because it's a very crucial concept here. I don't think we spend time talking about vulnerability, why it's important to be vulnerable. I mean, we all want control. I often hear people talk about women as being control freaks. I don't hear people referring to men as control freaks. Is it because it's supposed to be in our very nature? And therefore, if that is supposed to be in our very nature, which is a word I don't like talking about nature, um, what do we do then in the face of this vulnerability? Why can't I just say, okay, unfortunately, I am not able to meet up, and therefore, can some other person help me?
So, when we talk about vulnerability, we can look at it from a number of different facets. Think about a tree, for instance. When you've got a strong wind, if a tree is going to survive, it needs to be pliable, it needs to be supple. So it bends in the direction of the wave, of the wind, that pressure. And that is what keeps it, that is what sustains it. If it were brittle and could not bend over, what would naturally happen? It would break. So it is that flexibility that gives it stability. Now, let's plow that back into the whole concept of vulnerability. What does it mean to be vulnerable? You see, vulnerability is all about being in a place where you're trying things out. You don't have all the answers, and you have to test the waters to see what works. Go back to when you were a child. Before you learned how to walk, you had to come to a place and a space where you would you would stand, balance, try to walk, fall, pick yourself up, and go at it again. Is that not correct?
Absolutely is.
Now, if you tried once and then twice and you decided you were not going to fail again and you just did not want to carry on with that journey, if you didn't want to go through the pain of failure, then you would be stuck in a particular place. And from that place, your opportunities downstream would be limited. In a relationship, what are these opportunities? These are the opportunities to build synergies, the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to take two people to a place where they can become that light that we talk about. So vulnerability is about understanding that you do not have all the answers, understanding that there are certain things you're going to learn, you're going to have to, the relationship is going to grow you. And it is through exchanges, through communication that you will grow. You will get certain things wrong. Being able to say, yes, I got this wrong. Being able to say, I don't think I'm an expert at this area. And recognizing the strengths in your partner and encouraging them to take the lead where you realize that they clearly have the wherewithal or the technical know how to do certain things. That is what vulnerability, in essence, is all about. Now, being able to do that would take a relationship to places. Not being able to do that stifles a relationship. Now, you said something as well, which has just gone off my mind. If it comes back, I will talk to it. You can go on with the next question, the next
So,
remarks.
you're moving off to women to talk about women as being naive within the same context, because again, I'm sure you are putting two areas of vulnerability, isn't it?
Yes.
The man is vulnerable in terms of you don't have all the answers. Okay, you don't know it all. He comes to a place where he's supposed to be in control. Okay, he knows the terrain, respect, value, and valor because he's doing the things. He knows where to go to for the answers. But when that situation arises where he looks vulnerable, you put it perfectly. That fear, that aversion now turns into some form of control. And I was saying, but generally, women are the ones who are often said to be in control. And that becomes a problem within, especially call it within our immigrant community, where we come from a place where the man has always been said to be in control, being in power. So when you come to a place where there's that inversion of roles or reversal of roles, you start having the friction. But let's hear about the vulnerability of the woman, then we can go back to talk about how to manage these vulnerabilities. You talked about communication and how that is possible.
Sure. So you just said something which is very important, which is control, and labeling. So when we label women as control freaks, when you look at the other side of the equation, you never really hear that a man is a control freak. That's because we almost live in a man's world, quote unquote. Now, hopefully that gets to change and we see a balance. But you would only call a woman a control freak because it feels like she's trying to take the place of a man. So that is where that would come from. Now it begs the question: is the woman really being a control freak, or is it just another ploy to silence her? You see, because if we live in a society where the man is seen as authority by and large, where the man is thought of as the person who's supposed to give direction, the man is thought of as the one who's supposed to speak, and everyone else is supposed to jump when he gives an order or ask how high. Do you see how it then moves to a place where women, when they find their voice or try to take their place in society or at the table, they are then subjugated using these different labels, because these are sophisticated. I call it the sophisticated art of manipulation. You use a label to talk someone into a corner so they can be quiet, because nobody really wants to be labeled. Now let's move on from there and talk about what I mean when I say women are naive, or women. Obviously, again, it is within a specific context. We're saying we use these words generally, and this naiveness is again wanting to achieve something but not knowing how to go about it. So there's just a role reversal of sorts here. We have two people who are communicating, but in their bid to communicate, they walk past and they talk past each other, but they fail to communicate. So the woman is doing everything she can to empower a man. See, because everything she does, and we are assuming a scenario where two people are in love and they want to see each other grow. They want to exchange energies and build synergies. So you're talking about a woman who wants to empower a man, but she just doesn't know how to go about it because everything that she tries fails. When she sees something that the man is doing which is incorrect or which is counterproductive and she points it out, it's almost like she gets hit on the head. She gets rebuked for it. And so the question is, how does she adjust? It all depends on the nature of the rebuke. You see, because when men react, they do so in self-defense. Now, don't ask me what we defend when we do that. Again, is that vulnerability or the resistance. We do not want to be vulnerable. So we feel vulnerable, but we do not want to be vulnerable because we associate that to and with a weakness. And nobody wants to be weak, especially the man. The man doesn't want to seem or look weak before his family or in front of his kids and or in front of his wife, because he believes if he is weak, then he will lose respect. But again, these are notions which we need to slowly eradicate, because these are the root causes of almost all the problems that we see in the family unit or within the family. So let's come back to the woman. You have this person who's doing everything she can, everything in her power to empower her man. And she meets these roadblocks. When she tries to correct, what comes to the fore, what she sees in the limelight, her weaknesses are exposed. So she's making an attempt to empower the man that she loves. And what this man does instead is highlight her own faults and ends up correcting her. So you get your partner eventually to a place where she's not sure when, whether, or how to engage you when it comes to areas of growth for you or your own opportunities to grow. And women are very sensitive, obviously, to what men say and to what we say, to what their loved ones say. So they listen, and they listen keenly, and they look for meaning, and they look for value. So whatever it is a woman is told, generally, she tries to look for truth. And if she's in love, she tends to believe what has been said and goes on to remedy the situation. So if I'm trying to correct you and you're finding faults with me, then I'm looking at myself to see what it is I'm doing wrong. Now that cycle continues for a while, and it leaves the woman in a place where she's extremely frustrated. Now, the frustration is one of not being able to reach the man. And what then happens? Now, if I can't reach you, it doesn't matter which way I go, what I say, I feel I'm being pushed away. Eventually, I don't feel appreciated, and I start feeling like I'm not good enough. Now, if I feel like I'm not good enough, then obviously I wouldn't know how to approach you after a while of this repeat cycle. I wouldn't know how to approach you. And so again, communication takes a hit. It becomes a trial and error thing. I'm engaging, but I can't meet you. You engage, you can't meet me. And this is where the crisscrossing happens. So we walk and we talk past each other, but we do not communicate. So we've come back now to communication.
Yeah, so BK, in this context, when you have these two, call them vulnerabilities, clashing, the ignorance of the man clashing with the naivety of the woman properly understood, and your solution to that seems to be communication. It becomes difficult because the communication has already broken down, and I believe that it is that the baggage that I have brought, the other person is not seeing it. And let me phrase this differently. In terms of when we all come into a relationship trying to show that we are better off than the other person, or trying to show that we want to change the other person to be who we want them to be, rather than accepting them for who they are and trying to see how together we can build. I believe that is where the breakdown comes in. Or am I wrong?
Say that again.
So I have come to a relationship with a baggage.
Yes.
The other person is coming with their own baggage. But instead of them acknowledging the fact that both of us have baggages, one person is trying to change the other person to be what they want that person to be. And no matter how much the other person is trying to say, Take me for who I am and let's journey together. The other person say this is not what I expected. And there's already a breakdown there such that the vulnerability of the man, and I'm going to come to a comment that Diane has just made, the vulnerability of the man then plays out. And that is how you start getting, because you put it so well. Once that fear comes in, force also comes, isn't it? Because you're afraid you are losing something. That is how you get into brute force in order to gain back the what you perceive as the control you have lost. But I'm
Yes.
saying the other party should be also, I mean, you should be able to say, who is the man that I am relating to? What are the gifts of this person? Instead of this good for nothing person, if not of me, you would not have been where you are, which is where this thing keeps coming and then people hitting each other day and night. Okay. So I'm asking, rather than just thinking of the vulnerabilities, the problem is also of how we see each other and whether we are on this journey together or just trying to outsmart each other or outplay each other. Or I may be wrong.
You're very correct. So it's not one or the other. It is a combination of everything you have said and some. You see, and this is where these energies again come to play, because you highlighted something very important, which is that ability to see the other person. It is not something that happens a whole lot, especially when we're vulnerable. That ability to see past who I am and to actually make space in my space for the other person's space. It takes a lot of maturity to come to get to that place. See, um, it it goes right back to the primary reason why people get married. Half the time, people come together and they get married because they are ticking a box. It is time to get married. So they never really took the time to understand who they were as individuals. They never really took the time to understand where they were going in life. They never took the time to understand what their respective values were, what respect meant to the other. We tend to look at the world or define value in terms of what people have achieved, where they appear to be going, what accolades they have, and what potential they seem to have. Now, these are the tangibles, these are the things that we can see, touch, taste, smell. There is that intrinsic, the true value, the things that we should be looking for, and that is where true potential lies, are not the tangibles. They are the soft values, those qualities that are intrinsic, qualities that can't be measured by any KPI. You can't quantify them, you can't qualify them, you can only feel them. And that is the essence. That is the essence of who we are. When you look at things like respect, how respectful is that person? When you look at how they relate with people who can't help them in any way, shape, or form, when you look at where they are going in life, it's all right to look at what they are achieving. That's perfectly fine. But then, what is the moral compass that is at play as they journey on, as they become enlightened? Is the growth internal? Is the growth, are they looking at internal growth? Are they looking to grow from within out? Or are they looking to grow in terms of what it is they can hoard? The number of what, how much property they have got, the size of their bank account, um, what investments they have, and how they're growing in that area. What about the intrinsic values of that person? How patient are they? Now, these are things that only a true relationship can reveal, can expose. And most people come to this phase, come to the place where they start looking at these intrinsic values when they are married. And for some, entrapped. Now, it's not a problem by and large, if you ask me. if you ask my opinion. It's never a problem if two people get married and they don't have a clue who they are. As long as these two people are more than willing to learn, grow, to become enlightened so they can self-actualize. As long as these two people can sit at the table and decide and determine what values they are going to have, if they can set a roadmap and determine and decide where they are going, why they are going in a particular direction, and how they get there, then everything else becomes easy. Why do I say easy? I say so because in any relationship, no two people can ever satisfy each other 100%. I'll say that again. In a relationship, no two people can ever satisfy each other 100% at all levels. You see, who we were when we just got married. I'll take a practical example. My wife and I, when we got married, we were all at different places in life. 10 years or how many ever years down the line, with two kids in between, kids will change you. Kids will force you to grow, become more mature, become enlightened, and self-actualize in so many ways. It's either that or they will make you become more irresponsible if you run away and shy away from your responsibilities and you make them someone else's problem. So that's the beauty of kids. They will make or they will break you. They don't leave you ever the way you were, the way they met you. Once we take a decision, make a decision to have kids, we have made a sworn oath to grow or be destroyed by that decision to have the kids. So I'll come back to the statement that I made. No two people can satisfy each other 100%. We all start as one thing. We will morph, we will grow, we will change, we will have different values, we will go in different directions, and all the while, we're still going to have to communicate, verbal, elate, and find points of commonality which will allow us to grow. Sometimes you may have to grow independently in a particular area because that is who you are and that is what you're driven to become. It doesn't mean there won't be areas of overlap where you can come together with your wife and grow in that area. And these will be the areas that bring you two together, and they will help you to materialize whatever it is you aspire towards as a couple or as a family. And this is where goals again come in very handy. You see, because goals are the fuel of any relationship. They are not just the fuel, they are the bearings of that relationship. They give it direction and they give it momentum. But when you look at most relationships, what happens over time? The only thing that two people would have in common would be the kids and the activities that these kids need to be party to, where they have to go, when they have to be there, what they have to do, and who's taking them there, and who's in charge. Little dates start going out of the equation, and any relationship, like everything else, is like a plant. You have to tend it. You have to nurture it. It needs water, it needs sunshine, it needs light. It needs compost in order for it to do well. You can't just throw it. You can't just sow your seed and hope that a miracle will happen and it will come to fruition and bear fruit. That doesn't happen. They say in life, we get what we work for. And I don't believe in the wrong marriage. I always believe that people find who they need in order to grow in a particular direction. So we go around life looking for teachers. And the person we end up with, the person we marry, especially if we don't get along with that person after a while, that person is our teacher. That person is the best thing that happened to us. Because the only reason we don't get along with them is the following: we are resistant, we are stubborn in a particular area in our own lives. That person has become a threat. It could be an area, it could be, it could come down to communication. It could come down to us not being able to communicate what it is we're trying to do, because that's what communication is. If I can't get through to you and I'm trying to communicate something to you, then until I get through to you, I've not communicated. Now, when I, as a man, or you, or the other person as a woman, gets frustrated because there has been a misunderstanding, one or both of us is or are impatient. Because again, for as long as there is communication, there will never be problems. So when communication breaks down, the question you want to ask yourself is, why and how did that happen?
So, BK, you make it sound so, it's like some easy thing that, anybody can just, well, once it breaks out, you know. But I think there's more to it than meets the eye. Yeah, okay. And I want to welcome
Actually,
Diane. Yes, yes. Diane, I want to welcome Diane, Daiga, Jude, Ozuge Nagwa, Lawrence Young, and there are a few comments there that we'll get to. But again, I like for us to focus on the men, isn't it? That is who we are in terms of, we let's put I hate to put it as if it's a problem, even though it is a problem in our community, because a lot of these relationships have broken down. I don't want to think it's because the men did not want to work on it. I don't want to think it's just because they did not want to communicate. You know, for me, I'm trying to assess what is it. Our parents. My father lived with my mother for 40 plus years. I mean, married. We never heard any of that stuff going on. And we ask ourselves, is it that this stuff never happened? And
I
for
would like
most
to.
of us, especially for those of us who are abroad, marriage has become such a nightmare, and it's like, okay, what is it in this environment that is making it so difficult for us men to be able to sustain these relationships? What is it? What is the problem? Is it just a breakdown? Is it just that? And something that Diane said, she said, men are, I mean, they are resistant because of bruised egos. That is why when you challenge, we have bruised egos. And I'm wondering whether I could speak to that. Is it just that our egos are in the way, or is just in our very nature not to want to listen to women? What is it about? I mean, I know it's an oversimplification because we know some marriages back home that have not worked too. But that was rather the exception than the rule. Majority of these things work. But for most of us, for many people out here, marriage has become a nightmare.
I love
Okay.
that question.
Yeah. And so and I'm seeking as a man to understand. And that is why the phrase you just made there, it's really striking. No two people can ever satisfy each other 100%. I think I got into a relationship and I'm giving my all. I want this woman to be. I really want her to get a good life. What is it that is preventing me from giving my 100%? Too many things packed there for you.
Thank you. No, that's fine. I love the question, and we will deconstruct it. Let's pick it apart. Let's start by going back to the African setting, specifically Cameroon. You would notice it was not a level playing field. And that is part of the problem, Lambert, if you ask my opinion, because um, there were certain things that were the norm. There were certain things that were just a given. For instance, if a man had extramarital relationships, it was not frowned upon as much as, in fact, it was talked about, laughed at, and it was almost normal. But for the woman, if there was as much as suspicion that she befriended someone or got too close to someone else, that in and of itself was a problem. So it was not a level playing field. It was skewed to the advantage of men, if you ask my opinion. And I don't like that balance. If you looked at the dynamics of relationships back home, you would realize that most mothers would make statements like, "Oh, we're just there for the children." And that speaks volumes. Last week, we talked about this whole scenario where mothers took kids hostage because they were depending on the kids for love, the love that they couldn't really get from their husbands. And so, once certain things are normalized in society, it becomes very difficult for women to actually have a say. It becomes difficult for women to have a voice. And so they just accepted certain things because they were challenged. They couldn't do anything about it. They were defeated. That is why I love this society. That's what I love about the West. Because now it becomes a level playing field. Nobody has got advantage, any advantage over the other. Nobody has got power of attorney, so to speak, over the other person. It becomes your ability to, like I always say, exchange energies and build synergy. So it becomes a question of the quality in the man. It becomes a field where the man, as opposed to the African man, but where the man, and again, that was the generalization because not all men are that way. But notice it is a virus that we are by and large inoculated with by virtue of living in a certain environment, because ultimately we become our environment and the culture that is propagated through that environment, the influences that are infused within that environment, that which is accepted as normal in that environment. These are the principles, these are the values that we imbue. They are imbibed in us and they are sewn deep within the fabric of our character, and we don't even realize it. We come to expect it. So we grow in an environment where dad used to speak and everything used to happen and nobody would challenge him. In fact, women would almost bow when their men spoke. And as a child, if you see that, then you come out here, you're married, you don't expect any less. And so you would notice that in that environment, words like respect eventually take a very twisted meaning, because respect becomes associated with power, authority, control, which in and of itself is counterproductive. So it's an environment which is by and large toxic, and it stalls the growth of the man. So I love the fact that we come out here as men and we have the opportunity to be true fathers and true husbands. No disrespect to men who have not had this experience where they can't coerce their wives. They have to sit at table and talk man to man, so to speak. And if they're going to have an edge, they will have an edge because what they said made sense, not because they bulldozed their way through that relationship, not because they subjugated the other person. So we come out here and it's a different dynamic. The environment is configured completely differently, and the challenges are different. You and your spouse go out to work. Sometimes your spouse earns more than you do. You come back home and you still expect your spouse to prepare food. And most do, they don't complain about it. But when that becomes an expectation, it is a clear indication that that marriage is on the rocks. Because the day she says, honey, I need help with this, the man feels disrespected. That she won't even realize it. He may not say it, and he may do stuff begrudgingly. Because to him, the fact that she asked him to do something is outrageous. My mother never asked my father to do anything. But it's not something that he can say to his wife. Why not? Because she will have a ton of answers to come back with. And at the end of her response, he wouldn't know what hit him. So he may do it begrudgingly, or he may just walk out. And that's the beginning of that communication breakdown. Ego, Diane mentioned or highlighted, is a very important factor, because what's the ego? The ego is that social construct. That's what I call it. I call it a social construct. It is who we put out there to represent us, because we're too much of a chicken to show up. No disrespect to us men. That's what ego is by and large. It doesn't matter whether it is growing in a man or growing in a woman. I'll give you a practical example, Lambert. If I tell you that I love you as a friend, you know, this is not something that men are used to. See, we're talking about strength. We're talking about communication. We're talking about expressing emotion. So that's another thing. Expressing emotion, showing someone that you truly care. Do we only do that when we want something? Or do we do it as part and parcel of who we are, as part and parcel of the fabric of that relationship? So you notice that this whole power thing is a big ploy in the gambit of all relationships. Coming back to this field of play, the European field of play, and the world is becoming more of a global village, which means you have more people who come out here and then they go back home, and you have more women who have lived out here. So when they go back home, they don't necessarily subscribe to that modus operandi that they left way back then when. I call it archaic. That archaic environment, that was a hostile environment. In fact, I'll go to the extent to say it was a primitive environment, and it did not do us men justice. So I would thank our parents who did everything they could to send us out here to understand and to get a real taste of the real world, and to see what it means to actually grow. And when I talk about growth here, I'm not talking about material growth. I'm talking about value-driven growth. The essence of who you are, growing from within and coming to a place, attaining a certain level where who you are from within manifests as what you have on the outside, not the other way around. If you want to interject, now will be a good time before I carry on.
Yes, because I was trying to get on, I think, read out some comments, but so a couple of comments for you there. Great point. That's from Jude Ozugen. We often miss the essence of the necessity of an honest and vulnerable communication. That doesn't mean making one's case, but doing the work required to understand one's feelings, to express them in ways that are respectful and truthful, and then to stop talking and listen without being defensive and without judgment. Men are often defensive because of a lurking perception of suspicion that women often bring to bear in the relationship. Thus, the expression, I think I'm missing something there. So, men are often defensive because of the lurking perception of the suspicion that women often bring to bear in the relationship. I think he meant to say something. I don't see the last part of it. Mr. Divine Chamukong joining the conversation late. but makes a very important point. I don't think marriages back home work as we tend to think. The patriarchal hegemony of men simply suffocates, unlike in the West, where women speak up and speak out a lot easier. And comment to you there, BK, great guests. So again, I mean, I want to take exception to that comment about Africa and Europe because I don't think it's more just the patriarchal thing. And I mean, there are many people who enjoy their marriages within that system. Or am I wrong? Many of our mothers, is it because they did not travel abroad? I mean, because that's what I seem to hear you say together with Mr. Divine Chamoko. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no. So let's look at it from this perspective, and I respect your opinion. See, I love what Divine said. Divine clearly said we need to come to a place where we can actually disagree and then have a conversation to reach consensus. So, many of our don't forget again to put this in context. We're speaking generally, which means there will always be exceptions by and large. But then to address your question, since we can't all be on the same side, I'd like to take the opposite side. That way it can get interesting. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Okay, cool. So there is something called resignation. I'm resigned to a situation because, hey, hang on a minute. If I walk out of this house, I can't go home because I will be a disgrace to the community and to the entire village and to my family. I left my marital home. That is sacrilege. I'm sure you would agree with me.
That far, even though I mean, move on. Yes.
Okay. If you grant me that, so you would notice that you'd have lots of people who will be stuck in a situation who know that they can be a lot more than what they can be because, see, we were not put here just for the fun of it. God, and no offense to those who do not believe in any particular being. I mean, I know we all believe in something. It could be the sun god. It could be, what do you call it? It could be, it could be Krishna. It could be Allah. It could be, what is this other interesting one? Come on, help me here. Help me here, Lambert. What are all
Yes.
these different deities?
Buddha.
It could be Buddha. It could be Scientology. You name it.
Could
It
be
could
a
be the
rock.
it could be, yeah, it could be the Big Bang, but we all accept that something is responsible for what we see out here. It did not just show up. And it is that thing that is responsible, that field that is responsible, that I refer to as God. And I would say God did not put us here to get married, frustrate each other's lives or one another, and then check out. No, there's a bigger purpose. We've all got work to do. We're all tools. And until you know what tool you are, you can't really lead a fulfilled life. And that is the essence and the premise of what Lambert and I are doing here. Because imagine a world where every man knew what tool he was, a place where every man was fulfilled by who he was and the difference he made. The thing that made him wake up in the morning, the thing that fired him up, the thing that made him go out there and want to serve a cause and drive a purpose that was bigger than the self. If everybody could do that, just imagine the world we would be in. So you go out there, you work, you make a difference, you're fulfilled, you come home, take care of your family, you empower them again, and you realize that it doesn't matter whether you're at work or you're at home, you're being fulfilled, you're being energized, you're being empowered, you're being inspired, you're being motivated, you're being fired up to make more and more of a difference. Take an example, Lambert. When you do this, your journalism thing, you come alive, true or false.
Oh, true.
Exactly. It's like there's a time freeze. Now, go back home. You would notice that the men had the liberty, they had the latitude, and they had that whole tenacity. They had the terrain, free reign to be who they could and wanted to be. But then you would have men who would tell their wives, you will stay at home and be a stay at home mother or stay home wife. Some men even do it here, out here in Europe. Now, if that is not short sightedness, Well-intentioned short-sightedness. I don't know what it is. And that can only be lack of the education that we need to realize that we all need to come to a place where we create sustainable communities, and a community where there are no safeguards, where one person is growing, self-actualizing at the behest of their gift and talents and at the expense of their spouse's dreams and aspirations. Because usually, I'm sure you would agree with me, the woman would have to park her dreams to the side. It's not even subject to debate. Nobody talks about it. It doesn't come to the table for discussion. It is what it is. Un point, un trait. And if she tries to push, oh well, she is being stubborn. Now, in a dynamic like that, do you envisage a woman ever being enlightened? Do you envisage a woman ever being fulfilled? The answer, the straight and simple answer to that would be no. Because she will take care of the kids up to a certain point. What happens when those kids grow up and check out? She becomes a vegetable.
But BK,
Yeah.
reverse that role. What if they had a conversation and because the woman is, call it, the one who has the opportunity to work, okay, and
Mhm.
the man is the one to stay home to bring up the kids and all that. Even if a
Yes.
man accepted that role, he will be abused as a lazy fellow, okay, and all kinds of things will be thrown at him. I mean, even if not the wife, society will look at the man and say, "What kind of a man are you?" Okay, so are we looking? And again, it's about this labeling thing. Is it about
Yes.
something that works for the family? I agree with you. There's no reason
Mhm.
why you should come and say a woman should stay at home to bring forth the kids while you go to work every day and do all that. But I'm saying you have to look at the situation. What is my reality? What is the reality of our family? What works for us? And very often, while men may agree to say, hey, for the sake of these kids, for the sake of everything, let me be the breadwinner while you take care of everything at home. That doesn't work because tomorrow it's like, oh, look at this woman, I did everything for her. Look at how she's treating me today, isn't it? Because of the perception both of the man and of the woman, depending on where that is how we fall into this conflict thing. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, and I love that. You see,
Mhm.
what I like about this is because the fact that we're beginning to pick this into its little bits and pieces and going down the nooks and crannies and going down the rabbit holes, and we will go through those rabbit holes and hopefully shine enough light so people realize it looks dark, but it's never really dark down there. You made a point, reality. It begs the question, Lambert. Are you going to contest the fact that reality is what we make of it and it doesn't exist? Because we are all just a field of energy. The concept of me doesn't exist until I start interacting and or engaging with you. Do you understand that?
Mhm.
I only find me when I engage with you. And I only become whole when I find space as well for our audience in this conversation, because that is how I get to understand my strengths, my abilities, capabilities, and my limitations. Then, when I see my limitations, I'll be looking for someone I can partner with to help me grow in that area. And that is how I become whole eventually. So, we live off and we feed off each other. We exchange energies and we build synergies. And that is what life is. That is the only reality there is. Absolutely any other reality is substandard. So you talked about the concept of, or the scenario where the man is living at home and society is doing what society is doing. Lambert, help me. If I'm at home and my wife is going to work and we are comfortable in our little unit as our family, who cares what society is doing? People who are actually falling apart, breaking their homes, fighting and at each other's throats, jumping off windows because they can't get along, are the ones who will be laughing at me. Do you understand that?
Right.
So sometimes, exactly, sometimes we need to check who the opposition is. We need to check where the feedback is coming from before we respond to it. And when we engage, we should respond and not react. You see, because if If I start a fight with a fool, I'm sure you'd agree with me that if you met someone who was mental and they insulted you, you would not start a fight. In fact, you will go down on your knees and you will pray for them. You would ask yourself, oh, what could possibly have happened for such a beautiful creature, a human being, to find themselves in such a dilapidated state? And you would wonder what you could do to salvage the situation. Now, swap that and put a man in front of you or a woman in a suit, well dressed, and they threw an insult. Oh, well, all of a sudden you're engaging, you're rolling your sleeves, and you're throwing a couple of punches back. Why? Now, the fact that that mental person is dressed up in a suit doesn't make them any less mental. And the moment you engage, you are no different. It means now we have two mental people engaging and exchanging, and hopefully they'll get to learn when they finish their little squabbles. It will teach them something, that it was not worth it.
So,
Is it all? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead if you want to round up your thought there.
Yeah, no, I was just going to come back to this whole thing of what the family is doing. And this is the most important point, because when you look at society, the society we live in, what is the smallest unit of society? It is the family. So if the family goes wrong, society is wrong, because it is the family that eventually trains the, well, call them the leaders of tomorrow. They are the ones who will be in government tomorrow. So if they do not have the right foundation, then when they go to school, the teachers can only struggle with what it is that they have been given, because teachers are not miracle doers. They can't create miracles. If, as parents, we're not helping our kids grow, the teachers can only do so much with them. I'm sure you know that. Then they will move from there into business, into politics, into media. And if this culture, this decrepit, denigrated culture transcends all these other areas, you notice, then you see how the fabric of society becomes infiltrated, and it all comes down like like a house of cards, because the values have all been compromised. So we compromise ourselves at the level of family, because we put and attach so much importance to what people say. How are they looking at us? What are they saying about us? Oh no, we can't do this. And then we start fighting. My spouse and I are pitching a fight because some non-entity, no disrespect, I just call them non-entity, because they have absolutely no role, positive role to play in our lives. They may be very important where they are, but that importance stays there. We need to know where to draw the line, where to set the boundaries. We engage, we interact with everyone, but then we quickly discern and decipher who is adding value to our lives. Somebody comes and sees something which is beautiful in my family. It may not be that which reflects society, but that is what works for us. If my wife is earning 100K a month, help me. Why would I need to go to work if I can stay with the kids and bring them up the way I want to see them grow? If we can create proper leaders for tomorrow, who will then take the world to a place where everyone can be the best that they can be with the resources that they have, because the values at the top are just what they need to be. That is the responsibility of the man in a home. And so when a man fails his home, that is what he has compromised. That is what he's doing to society as a whole. Back to you.
I have, just before I come to that, again, Mr. Divine Chamukong says, I would like your guest to address the place of Christianity as a thermostat. Again, that's where you started off. A pastor will tell you that the chaos we talk about is as a result of the absence of Jesus.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, Divine. So, Divine, don't forget. Oh, Mr. Chamoko. Sorry, I hope it's okay if I call him Divine.
He's a journalist, so I guess he'll be fine. He should be fine
Okay.
with that.
All right, cool. So divine. Sorry, I'm not calling you divine out of disrespect. It's just because I want to engage and I want to relate. And the less formal it is, the easier it is for us to engage and interact and exchange energies. It works a lot easier that way. We're talking about titles and all of that, and that how they get in the way of progress, of achieving laudable and plausible outcomes. And this is that, so that's what it's really all about. We just show up as who we are, no identities. So you make a very important point. I was just going to say, don't forget that the last time Jesus showed up, we tied him to a tree. So let's of course, and
That's a good one.
absolutely. And there's a part of me that tells me that if Jesus were to show up today, he may not. He lasted 33 years. I think he taught for three or so. His discipleship was about 3 years before he checked out. And something tells me if he showed up today, if he were lucky, maybe 3 months, 3 weeks, and if not too lucky, he would last 3 days. The way we're going today, but obviously, so the absence of Christianity. So Christianity again, for those who are not um, who who do not subscribe to this particular persuasion, Christianity simply means followers of Christ. And when we say followers of Christ, it's not following in his footsteps as in he's walking and going in front of us and we are trailing behind him. No, it is his teachings, his word. We're talking about the 10 commandments, which by and large reduce into 2 commandments or 1 commandment: love or do unto others what you want done unto you. And if we want to summarize and condense that even further, including the Bible, and I would even go, I would stretch further to say the Quran, all these principles can be reduced into one word, which is love. So I would rephrase your question and say yes, because of the absence of love, everything falls apart. And Christianity, like every other institution, seeks to imbibe and to integrate these values, these intrinsic values, non tangible values, which are pretty much what define us as people. So I am not my talent, I'm not my gifts. I am the spirit with which I execute on my abilities, my capabilities. The spirit, the moral guidance that drives me, that wherewithal, that is what defines me. Respect, giving, forgiveness, uh, love, gratitude. What else? So these values that again can't be touched, can't be can't be measured. Of course, we can feel them, we can experience them. Nobody can take them away from us, because that is what ultimately defines us. And if we can get to a place where we appreciate value in terms of these, I call them spiritual precepts, these spiritual concepts, these spiritual modalities, which are non tangibles, if we can get to that place, then we slowly realize that who we are is not the flesh, it's not the pain that we feel. Who we are is pretty much the sum total of our intentions. That intention station, and leave that conversation richer than we were before we joined it, and leave the people in the conversation more empowered and more enlightened than they were before we became a part of it. And as long as we are adjusting at all times, so we come into a conversation and we are like a car negotiating a bend, intent on negotiating that bend correctly, which means we will make tiny adjustments and adjust for desired outcome so we don't get to fail. we don't get to make mistakes. Because again, these are the words that entrap us. I don't want to fail. How do we define failure? I define failure, for instance, as that point where I stop making the effort. I stop doing what I need to do to get to where I need to be. That is the only time I've failed. A mistake in my eye is going in a direction I should not have gone and then making that adjustment to move in the right direction. So I wouldn't call it a mistake per se. It's like driving a car if you need to negotiate a bend. If you come to that bend, A, you can't negotiate that bend until you get there. B, if you get to that bend and you do not negotiate the bend, you will crash. In the meantime, you will make so many mistakes. You will fail so many times because each time you turn the steering wheel, you've adjusted. It means you saw that you were failing. So you had to adjust. Then you would adjust again, then adjust, and then balance out, then adjust and balance out. And eventually you negotiate that bend. So you negotiate the bend successfully, but you would have made 1,000,001 failures and corrected your trajectory in order to get to your destination. That is exactly how life is in my books. We're on this journey and we're navigating different terrains. We will be better on some terrains than on other terrains. And all we need to do is make these adjustments until we get our desired outcome. Now, if the outcome is to suit and to smoothen and to massage our egos, then that's what we end up with. If it is to grow, then that's what we end up with again.
So, BK, back to Divine's question. I
Yes.
hope you are not insinuating that Christians make the best lovers. I hope you are not insinuating that because I am a Catholic, so my marriage should not quote unquote fail. I hope you are not trying to say by any stretch that those who have not attained or who have not come to Christ are doomed in their relationships.
Okay, I love that question. See, because I will tell you that some of the best Christians that I know are pagans. That's a very bold statement to make, I know. So
Mhm.
again, these values are spiritual values, which means in my books, the person who follows these teachings, because love is something that we come into the world with. The Bible is written in every last one of our hearts. What we call intuition, what we call conscience, knowing what is wrong and what is right. I'm sure you would all agree with me that uh, a new a newborn child, you walk into a room and a baby, not a newborn child. Let's say a child who's about 6, 7, 8 months old. You walk into a room and they're doing something wrong and they know it, they will jump. But if you walk into a room and they were doing something that was innocent and all right, they would turn and they'll be excited to see you. So there is something in there. There's a moral compass already in there. The question is, do they grow and enhance that compass, or do they grow and are contaminated by the values which pretty much make the society they are living in? So I will not be too hung up. Why did I say this? Why am I saying this? I wouldn't be too hung up on words like, oh, Christianity, Catholic, Muslim, because by and large, all of that is religion. So religion will be the culture that we build around the teachings of Christ. And those teachings are timeless. They cut across race, they cut across age, color, creed, you name it. They cut across all those platforms. It's difficult to define good and bad, but then that which serves the collective good can be defined as good, pretty much by and large. And I don't think there is anyone who doesn't know what the right thing to do is in any situation. Work to preserve life. Do what you can to enhance and to grow your community, including yourself. Serve a, a, a purpose that is bigger than the self, but that's where you find fulfillment. Now, it doesn't matter where you go, these values will reign supreme. So, no, divine, it has nothing to do with the labels, it has everything to do with the principles that you embrace as yours and make a part of your identity as you go through life, as you walk your path in life.
So in the remainder of the time, I really want us to circle back to to maybe the challenges within our community for us men. And we are talking about these men in a relationship, and as a result of the many problems that men are facing, where do we go to for help? Isn't it? Because women, they'll call a friend, they talk it over, and that's it, isn't it? When we continue, they have that. Men generally want to fold in, and that folding in is what builds up a lot of the tension. So much so that within a short time, you have built up so much tension that you are now ready to explode, even at the slightest thing. It's like a volcano that has been building up, isn't it? And so I think for us, it should be, what is it to pull all this together, all the conversations we have been having this far. So the vulnerabilities we have, the issues that we are facing, how to communicate, what should we as men be doing in order to make our relationships better, so that it doesn't get to that point where we are exploding for something that would have taken care of gradually over a period of time.
Yeah. I guess that's the $1,000,000 question, because like they say, you can take a horse to a stream, but you can't make it drink. So we could talk here till kingdom come, until men come to a place of, until we men decide to take this bull by its horns, until we come to a place where we're ready to engage. We're ready to start asking ourselves defining questions. We're ready to start asking ourselves what we want for our families. We're ready to really introspect and question if the things that we do are serving us or deprecating and depreciating us. Then we need to equally start checking our values, because that's where it starts. Who do we hang out with? Who's your tribe? Who's the person you talk to when you are in a bind? You made a very important statement there, Lambert. We tend to fold. So when things are not going our way, when we feel like we're losing control, we want to go into our cave. The problem with going into our cave is you go into that cave and you're depending on the same thinking that got you in trouble in the first place. So notice you need to come out of that space and experience something new if you're going to grow and overcome the shortcomings that you're trying to deal with. So if you go back to the same mind, you won't see your blind spots. Means we have to start talking. We need to start communicating. It is not programming where you can go away, roll your sleeves, and do something to fix the code. Or astrology, where you would then have to just go and perfect on your subject or whatever it is you're doing. Astronomy, you study the text and then you find your answers. In the concept, in this whole game called humanity, there is no manual. You do something today, it works. You repeat it 2 hours later, it fails. The exact same thing, and you're doing it with the exact same person. So there is no formula. And once we've understood that, then we realize that until we come to a place where we're building synergies, and you cannot build synergies on your own. So it starts with engaging. Then it begs the question, who are you engaging with? Who are your friends? You are the sum total of your engagements and your interactions. If you realize that the people you hang out with are just people with whom you sit, talk about women, talk about politics, talk about football, and then make fun of the rest of the world, then that is who you become by and large. Now, if it takes your mind away from the things that you're trying to run away from, perfectly fine for that moment. But when you leave that space and you go back to a productive place, you become counterproductive because that negative energy is still locked in you. So let's not look for ephemeral solutions. Let's not look for escapes to things that were meant to build us. Let us look for sustainable solutions. If you don't have a single friend in your circles that you can talk to and feel inspired, feel uplifted, feel to be and do something that is better, slightly higher than what you would normally do. And may I just say, it's not a journey for the faint-hearted. But if you don't have that kind of person in your circles, then I would strongly recommend you check your wardrobe or closet of friends. It may be time to redress your friendship hall of fame and to get some people in there that are actually resourceful on a human resource level. Not just people who can mentor you to become the next director or CEO or MD, rather people who can promote you to levels that nobody will see. They will just notice it manifest when you go out in the world and you interact because you're just such a joy to be in or to be around. And to conclude, I would like to say true leaders don't lead, they are followed. And so, for a man, if you have to flex your muscle, huff and puff for stuff to happen, then we're not doing it right. We've missed the plot. If we can just come into a place, smile, and people just adjust and do what it is they need to do, then we're getting it right. And until we get there, I'd say, let's keep having these conversations.
So, thank you very much, BK. One last question for you from Teddy, and it's a big one. How much worth is a mind without an environment to stimulate it? Brain waves are responsible for determining thoughts and actions. So, how do things we consume affect these vibrations?
Okay, that's an amazing question. Okay, Edward. So, you've just prompted me to talk about the think, feel, act cycle. So when you say brain waves are responsible for determining thoughts and actions, don't forget that you are a wave. You are a field of energy. See, because if I were to look for you, if I ask myself, who's Edward? And I started looking for Edward within you, I would go through through all your systems. This will be a bit long, but for the purposes of this exercise, I'd ask you to just bear with me so we go through it. I would go through the different systems that make up your organism, the person we call Edward. What are some of these systems? The respiratory system, the digestive system, the nervous system, as you're aware, and you name it. You have about 5 of those systems. Obviously, you're not any one of those systems. Let's go further. We will encounter organs, the lungs, the liver, the pancreas. These are all organs. Obviously, you're not any of those. Let's go further. We will encounter tissues. Tissues are groups of cells that come together to perform a similar or the same function. We look at all those connective tissue and the like, and you're not any of those. All right, let's keep going. From tissues, we go to the cell. Are you the cell? No. Let's go in. We're still looking for Edward. We look in the cell and we've got the cytoplasm. All right, that's not you either. Then we've got the nucleus. We go in there and we're looking for more. We have got DNA. DNA, we have chromosomes, and in there we've got chromatin and DNA. Okay, but that's still not you. It's just Jeanette, is a bit like a warehouse with all the different components that we need in order to manufacture all the proteins and then eventually polypeptides or the sugars that you thrive on or that you become. Those are the things, that the ingredients that construct you actually and maintain and sustain you. So we go further. Then we encounter molecules. These molecules pretty much would be your amino acids, the whole chain of polypeptides and all whatnot. We keep going. Next thing, okay, we've got atoms. We get into the atom and we look at it. We take it to an electron microscope, and you notice you've got 99.99999% space. It's just empty space with an electron or two. So it's just a field of energy, and then the electron disappears every now and then reappears. And as CERN, through particle acceleration, would tell you, that electron can be here and there at the same time and nowhere. So it can be in two places at the same time. You begin to wonder, so what's going on? So finally, you are 99.99999% space. But is that space nothingness? No, it is a field. Just as the space between two polarities, a positive and a negative pole, that space is potential, and that is a lot of energy. You're no different. Lambert, can you bring back his question? Because I would like to use the question now to complete what it is I wanted to say. So when you say the brain waves are responsible for determining thoughts and actions, Edward, you are these waves. Now, the waves that you're talking about are generated by your thought cycle. So you think, thought is energy, and energy follows thought. And when you think, you have to focus on a particular thing. When you focus on that thing, you give it meaning. The meaning that you give it becomes your experience, good or bad. And when you focus your thought on any one thing, it becomes energy in motion because it has been crystallized. So that's energy in motion, and it becomes your feelings. It translates into feelings. These feelings then represent whatever experience you gave to what you focused on, good or bad, painful or pleasurable. And so that becomes your positive or negative feedback mechanism that tells you whether you're going in the wrong or in the right direction based on where you want to go and where you need to be. So, how much worthy is a mind without an environment to stimulate it? It is true that you need an environment. It is also true that you can do introspection because by and large, you are always in communication with your environment. And there is something about the environment that is divine. I call it divine intelligence. So we are in communication with this environment at all times because the planet is living and it is a source of energy. It is its own intelligence. It is one with God, so to speak. Which is why people would meditate and come out of that meditation and feel renewed. And from that place, they feel invincible. So it is true that we can relate with other people, but we can relate with the self through introspection, where we're asking ourselves, this thing that I did, what was my motivation? What impact, what effect did it have? What adjustments can I make to ensure that I am having the results that I desire? I'm having the effect that will serve a wider community and empower everyone in it. For as long as we ask these questions, we tune into these frequencies and into these wavelengths, and then we download, so to speak, we download that knowledge. Those who wrote the Bible, for instance, where did they get their whole? I'll come to you, Brother Phil. Those who wrote the Bible, where did they get their inspiration from? Nobody taught them anything. It was, like they say, divine inspiration. Can you bring up Philip's question? Let me just link up to it and respond.
I don't know
Yes.
where Philip is coming from with this, but hey, morality is a mental prison. That in
Morality.
itself, what you just said, Philip, is imprisoning yourself. This phrase that you made is in itself a form of imprisonment. But BK, take it up.
Yes. So, and Phil is one of the minds that I respect and I admire so much because Phil will make you think. Phil is a resource. He will challenge everything that you believe in. And so hanging around Phil is honestly not a it's not something for the faint hearted. Now, Phil says morality is a prison in and of itself. The question I'd be asking Phil is, what does he understand by morality? See, because sometimes we use these terms and we assume that we all know what we're talking about. But if you were to have a lineup of about 10 people and you ask them what morality is, you would have 10 different responses. So, Phil, I just want to say, while I would love to take on this question, we need to start from a place where we define your concept and your understanding of morality, because you are 100% right and you are 100% wrong, depending on what your concept of morality is. See, because morality is meant to free us up to be whosoever we want to be. Now, the problem with freedom is it comes with responsibility. You can't be free if you're not responsible. And that responsibility comes with accountability as well. So what are you doing? Are you getting what you want from your engagements and or interactions? Now, if you're getting what you want at the expense of the person next to you, are you necessarily serving your community? Are you necessarily serving yourself even? Now, there are two ways of looking at that. If the person next to you is jealous because of what the achievements that you're having, then of course, it's again for them to grow. But if really what you're doing and the direction you're going means you're stepping on someone else's toes, again, it begs the question what stepping on someone else's toes exactly means. So you notice that ultimately nothing really means anything until we give it meaning, until we carve out a particular context, and then we pitch it in that context and see what effect it has within that particular area, and then how it ripples out and affects the wider community. Phil, I'm sure you know about the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings here in the UK, and you have a tornado, a tornado in California because of the ripple effect. It happens every day. So the sum total of our actions and the effects that they have, are we making the world a better place for everyone, or are we making the world a worse place for everyone? That is the ultimate question. Take waste, for instance, radioactive stuff. When you say morality is a mental prison, we can go about dispersing and dispensing radioactive waste all over the place because it is serving a purpose or two. Is it moral to do so? Again, how do we define morality? If we're going to take action and engage in ways that will exterminate humanity as a whole, is that in our best interest? Or are we going against ourselves and shooting ourselves in the foot? So Phil, you notice we can talk on that little thing that you've put out there for 2 weeks on end, and there will be really no conclusion because nothing means anything until we give it meaning. Back to you, Lambert.
So thank you very much, BK. I really want to appreciate it and appreciate everybody who has been on. I want to thank. Let me put up something my daughter put on here at the beginning of this show, which was kind of interesting to me. She said, "Please subscribe, like, and share. Remember to hit that bell, ding." So please, for us to build up this community, for us to be able to continue sharing these conversations, subscribe on my YouTube channel. We'll be here every Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. GMT. And we're going to continue having these conversations. Our focus, we are laser focused on men and mental health. We are not thinking that men have problems. No, we are saying we are responding in order to build up a community. Today, one of the best things that I heard today, one of the things that I learned, we need to exchange energies in order to build synergies. We need to exchange energies in order to build synergies. Let us try, let us continue as men. Look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, who am I? What is the energy I'm bringing? And how can I harness that energy in order to build synergy? We're going to make a request. If there are particular topics that you want us to handle, please, you can always leave that on my Facebook page, my YouTube, or reach out to me. Many of you know how to reach me. I want to thank my those who were on today, Mr. Jude Ozugen, Divine Chamukong, Antonio Montana. He also said it. If you're watching, please share so we can educate ourselves. Great show. Teddy, thank you very much. Philip Acha, he responded.
Philip has another question which I would like to take on before you close, really quickly, please.
So
I love his questions.
I don't need 10 people to define morality. Morality is the common interest of contemporary dominant thought. Example, during the slave trade, it was morally sustainable to own and sell other human beings. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, if that is your definition, then I don't have anything to say because there were people who were opposed to it but just did not have the power to change it, isn't it? It's not as if everybody who lived during the era of slave trade agreed to slave trade as moral. A majority of the people might have subscribed to it, but there were people who were totally against slave trade. But BK, that was for
Absolutely.
you.
Yes. During this, no, just please, can you just leave the question on there, please? Just leave the question on. So Phil says morality is the common interests of contemporary dominant thought. And again, when you say dominant thought, is it for the collective interest or for the collective detriment? Then you give your example, which is which makes sense. During the slave trade, it was morally sustainable to own and sell other human beings. Now, let us look at the context of that. Lambert has already addressed a very important part of it, which is true. Phil, what you may not understand as well is that during these in the slave trade, you had slaves as well who owned property and were really well off and well to do. So when we talk about owning slaves within in the context of the times at the time was not necessarily the twisted and contorted bit, because people will always, as they say, the devil will quote scripture to suit his or her intents and purposes. The Bible is no different in that regard. You can read scripture today and have one meaning. You read the same verse tomorrow, it will say something else completely to you, depending on your level of spiritual growth and where you are at any particular point in time T. So it is a dynamic, the word of God, as they say, is dynamic and it lives and it changes. So again, so what you've just said, during the slave trade, it was morally sustainable to own and sell other human beings. Now, if you're owning and selling other human beings and you're treating them right and putting them in positions of power, how different is it from what we're doing today? The only difference today is in the slave trade of today, I'm not in chains. I wake up in the morning and I go chain myself at my place of work. Nobody asks me to go there. I get remuneration from it. I can feed my family. I can take care of business as my wife as well as my wife does as well. So when we look at things in isolation, it is easy for us to give them right or wrong meanings. But when we look at what it was meant to do, was it subjugating? And was that subjugation right? Obviously not. Because again, the Bible will tell you the Old Testament and the New Testament are different sides of the same coin. One completes the other, one complements the other. It doesn't go against the other, which means love and grace are the two things that were meant to be exercised. It doesn't matter what these people were doing with or to themselves, as long as they were respecting the tenets of love and grace, forgiveness and giving, then they were in the right place. Creation and procreation, then they were doing the right thing. Now, were these used and abused? Of course, it's human nature. We're doing it today in worse ways, I reckon, than they did way back then when in the past. Thank you, Phil. Over to you, Lambert.
Well, I'm going to invite Phil. I know that these are conversations that we can continue to have, and it's always exciting having you and sharing your insightful thoughts. But at the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, we gotta go. Thank you. It's been an exciting Monday, day 2 of our series on men and mental health. And like I said at the beginning, if there are any topics that people want to share, want to have us talk about, challenge us, you want us to have these, we want to continue talking amongst ourselves, with ourselves, and together bring the message so that we can become a better community of men, taking care of each other, taking care of our families, so that, like BK said, we can bring forth children who are leaders of tomorrow. The society of tomorrow is dependent on how we are able to take care of ourselves, our family, our kids. Any last words, BK, before I wrap?
I just want to say, for me, it's a personal goal. It's a calling. It fulfills me, and it at the same time it really breaks me to see potential get lost in conflict. I look at families, I look at the pain, I look at the misunderstandings, and for those that I've worked with, I see the reasons for these misunderstandings, and that is the sad part of this equation. You see families with resources, you see families with potential, families that could go places. Yet, little things that are of absolutely no consequence get in the way of possibility. And if we could come together as a society, come together as a community, especially the men, because ultimately we as men are forerunners. We as men will be the key drivers. That responsibility has been put on us. We live in a society where it's a man. It is true that we are trying to move away from that grain. But with the man being the head of the family, if we can start by adopting a position that says to us that if the family fails, we have failed, I think that would be an amazing thing, because it helps us to look at life completely differently, and it helps us to make the effort that it takes to build society and leave society in a way that when we move on, it would be a better place just because we were here. There is no legacy or legacy that, in my opinion, is better than that. Starting something here today, running with it, and eventually handing it down to posterity so they can make the difference and succeed where we may not have shone a light. It is never too late. Let us start now.
Following up after this. Next Monday is another day, and within the context of Valentine's Day, we'll be talking a lot about the issues around the celebration of Valentine's Day. Like I said, if you have any topics you want us to handle, please just email, text. Thank you all. Have a great evening, and see you next week. On Wednesday, I'll be hosting yet another edition of African Immigrants and African Development. I will be having Sir Edward Okpa, and we'll be talking about Black History Month. Why should we continue celebrating Black History Month? Again, thank you, BK. Thank you all, and see you next.
Thank you. Have a good night.